So maybe we could talk a little bit about metrics. One of the things we introduced a number of years ago was a metrics framework that talked about this continuum of metrics. And because there is so much information out there today, and it's going to, the data explosion is going to persist. And so it can become overwhelming in terms of data and metrics. So we created this sort of continuum, and one of the things we talk about at the bottom is activity or output types of metrics, which we have been doing very well in marketing for a very long time, whether that's the number of visitors to our website, or the number of people who download something, or the number of people who attend a webinar.
The number of just press releases we've issued, the number of webinars we've run.
Exactly. Trade shows we go to, so forth and so on.
So that's the worst kind, these output metrics.
Well, it's not said that they're worse, although they're not helpful in making business decisions. They're not useful by the C-suite, and reporting on them to the C-suite is going to get you sort of a look of, or a question of, so what, right? So the operational metrics kind of came along, and our friends in finance actually helped us with those, like leads per rep, for example, right? Or revenue per head count, or things like that. Again, they're forcing us to be very efficient, but as Peter Drucker used to say, effectiveness before efficiency. So if you get there, you're going to end up being what we call the hamster on the wheel, because you're always going to try to be doing something more efficient, but you're not necessarily being more effective.
I think this is your line. You're doing the wrong things, but possibly really well.
Exactly. This is exactly right. So that's why we suggested that we have to get to these outcome-based metrics. And once you get there, you can move up to things related to leading indicators and predictive, which I know you're very engaged in when you're talking about forecasting, and you get there when you can do the predictive.
Yeah, I think for those outcome metrics, you have your kind of backward-looking metrics. How did we do? Right, and then you have your diagnostics, right? How are we doing? I guess that's sort of your middle tier, and then you have leading indicators. What's the future going to look like?
And so what we really tell people is, like, for example, one of the things most companies care about in our country, at least in North America, but I think this is true globally, is market share. Where are we in terms of our presence in the market? And so one of the metrics that many organizations can use is share of preference. So if the share of preference needle is moving to the right, eventually your market share needle will be moving to the right? But again, when you think about what most marketing organizations are tracking, they don't even look at share of preference. They're looking at maybe awareness, but certainly not that.
Good point. And I think, when marketers use the wrong, you said a good point, when marketers use the wrong metrics, right, the ones that don't connect to the CFO's mind to what they care about, cash flow, profit, and revenue, I think it hurts the marketer's credibility.
Exactly.
I think one of the metrics that I think are the most dangerous for marketers to use are cost metrics. Like cost per lead or something like that.
Yes.
And I think it has two main problems. The first is if you talk about everything in terms of cost, you perpetuate the perception that marketing is a cost center. Right. So I always tell marketers, it's not even cost, it's investment. Talk about your investment per something, and just that helps frame the discussion in terms of moving the right way. I think the second problem with talking about cost per metrics is, let's say you improve your performance and you reduce your cost per lead by 10%. An executive looking at that is going to say, great, I'll cut your budget by 10%, as opposed to figure out this is something I actually want to be investing in that works more.
I think you bring up a really good point, and this whole notion of ROI, how dangerous that can become. We wanted to show that we're doing and adding value to the organization, right? And the return isn't really only about the cost, back to that investment, but it's really about the impact as well. So you have to be looking broader than, I totally agree with you, than, like, for example, cost per lead. How about cost to acquire? What if the customer, for example, so as a customer as you're able to bring on a customer less expensively, that would be a better cost than necessarily cost per lead. Also time to acquisition, right? Because time is money. And if we can do something that might cost a little bit more cost per lead, but actually convert that opportunity to a customer faster, there may be real value in that. So those are better ways maybe to look at the financial contribution as opposed to just cost per lead.